And we are live.
Are we?
We are. We are live. We are living people. Hello, Internet. I'm really sorry to interrupt everyone's what I'm sure is feverish liking of Bowsette memes. But today, we are going to talk about something very near and dear to our hearts, by which I mean something that we're going to need more bourbon than usual to fully cover, and that is...
The worst characters created ever.
Yes.
Case in point, though, not characters in general fiction, things that we've created in our sick, twisted little minds.
Yes, these are the worst characters we have ever made. We're going to talk about the characters, we're going to talk about what makes them so terrible, and we're going to talk about how to avoid these pitfalls, how to make a more interesting and diverse cast for your own games. This episode has a format to it. That is to say, thank you for the sub. That is to say that anybody who has such an RP story and happens to be in our Discord is welcome to jump in, talk about their awful character. Ask me first, obviously. Just message me if you want to be a part of the program, and we can all share stories. But we're going to start with. I'm streaming audio echoes. Is it echoing bad? Do we have a... Doesn't matter. Okay, so... Now that we've... Okay, so we've got... I guess we got that fixed. Alright, so I'm going to start... I'm going to start with something that... I'm going to start with something that maybe some of you have heard me talk about before. And that is my arena rat character. Now, I don't know whether all of our listeners are going to be familiar with the concept of an arena rat, but it is a thing that happens in freeform roleplay where some people just want to fight. And that's fine. They can fight all they want, right? You can make all kinds of weird characters with weird abilities and throw them in an arena together, and they fight it out, and somebody wins and somebody loses. It's good fun. People do it all the time.
More often than not, though, it ends up being nobody wins, everybody loses, because it ends up being just a massive dick measuring contest.
That's because there are no rules. So I'd like to start this off with a quick quote from a dear friend of mine whose name is Nick, and who will not be joining us today, unfortunately. I did ask. There is no character more powerful than the girl who can make puppies appear anywhere.
Explain?
Do I need to? Do the implications of being able to make puppies appear anywhere not already blow your mind?
I would rather not suffocate on a puppy.
Exactly. You also would rather not have a puppy appear inside your chest.
Oh god, now I just will never imagine chest bursters as being anything other than adorable puppies.
I already saw them as adorable puppies. But basically the idea is that it doesn't matter how limited a character's power set is, if their powers are vague enough, they become an unstoppable powerhouse that should never exist. That's the kind of character I made when I was, 15, I think.
Confusion Kung Fu.
Well, no, actually. The character's name was Enyo, and he was a sci-fi portal wizard. Now, when I say portal wizard, you may think, yeah, okay, he makes portals. He can teleport, he makes gateways to other places. Yes, true. But these portals worked like portals. So, and he could put them anywhere. So, he could put one end of a portal somewhere off to the right, who knows, who cares, and then put the other side of that same portal in the center of the sun.
Or the center of a black hole, basically anywhere such as that. And if you're seeing any correlations between Rick Sanchez, remember this was years ago, and Rick has to be able to find a target to place his portals.
He actually very specifically could not put it in a black hole. Because it was limited to things within his, like... It was limited to things within his cosmic horizon, I think. Like, you can't reach inside a black hole because that would be a naked singularity, and the universe doesn't like those. But...
Don't divide by zero, kids.
Yes, indeed. So this character, you might think, okay, sure, portal here, portal center of the sun. It's basically a fireball, a much bigger fireball, and it doesn't sound like something that would make you that broken. Well, what happens if you put a portal on top of itself, right? So that the entrance and exit are exactly the same place. Well, the answer to that is that you just block everything, because it just hits itself.
Mirror magic, shenanigans such as that.
Right, exactly. And what happens if you make a portal with its two sides just a couple millimeters apart, and then throw the side of that portal at someone?
Oh.
Exactly.
Destructo Disc?
Yes, precisely Destructo Disc. This character was really dumb. And not because of, like, characterization things. He had a kind of an interesting characterization, because he was he was kind of your standard, like, I don't know, it's on the tip of my tongue. There is something on the tip of my tongue. He just wanted to be left alone. That's all he wanted.
Antisocial loner?
Not really, because he was a concert guitarist. He enjoyed being around people. He just kept getting attacked for some reason.
As most of these characters in freeform roleplay do.
Right.
And what that boils down to, it's either you have a situation where they become enough of a threat to somebody else simply by existing that they worry about their own special snowflake character, or sometimes people are just dicks. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that's literally it. But, so what made this character bad, the reason this character was bad, even though I can talk about the ridiculous things that I got up to in my Arena Rat days with great fondness, what made this character bad is that he was like Dragon Ball powerful for no reason. For no reason at all. Like, there was no characterization, no reason for it. Just a pure, ridiculous powerhouse. Because I gave him
no
one
backstory,
power,
no
gave him no limits.
No backstory, no tragic birth.
Oh, he had a backstory. His backstory was stupid. His backstory belonged in a his backstory belonged in a Marvel movie.
Oh God! Wait, are we talking
Not
early Marvel
movie. No,
movies?
I'm sorry, a bad Marvel comic.
Ugh.
Because most of his powers came from this time when he was just a brand new character on Red Dragon Inn. You knew that was coming back.
Ugh.
When he was just this random character. And there was a fight going on. It was a standard arena fight. Kind of. Against a robot played by Nick. And something happened. I don't remember the specifics of this. But something happened where he simultaneously died and teleported.
Wait, what?
Yes, exactly. It was like basically a teleporter accident, but the end result of it was he kind of had superpowers beforehand, but after that happened, he just went crazy. By which I mean, like, every limitation he used to have just disappeared.
For those playing the drinking game on TV tropes, he went mad from the power.
Technically, he went mad from the lack of senses, but it doesn't matter. My point is, this character started bad and became stupid.
I've got someone just like that.
Yes. Other things he used to do. He used to make a portal directly in front of himself, and then attach the other side to the bottom of a lake of liquid methane on Titan.
A portal attached to himself, and then one attached to methane lake.
Right, yeah, so he just sprays liquid methane at the enemy. It's an ice attack.
Sounds No, it doesn't.
It's not. It's not even a little bit reasonable. Nothing about this is reasonable. Like, he had 6 or 7 different required secondary powers just to be able to do this crap.
Oh, secondary powers. I'm topping off the bourbon now because this is going to be a night.
Yes, buddy, this will be good. Now, so, I'm going to quickly explain what went wrong with this character. Like, the reason it ended up like this. And that is that in the arena meta, right?
Oh, that's like 3 videos worth of shit there.
I know, but in the arena meta, people look down on having too many powers, right? And obviously that's the case in, like, standard roleplay. A character with too many powers is either A, useless, I should link the video about absurd, but either A, useless, or B, just completely has no characterization to him. It's just a pile of stats and powers. So, I decided to go the exact opposite way with it and just make one power that was absurdly broken. And I did succeed. I did succeed at that, but at the expense of, like, everything else about a character, right?
And all your friends.
Well, I didn't have any roleplay friends at that time apart from Nick, and he was an arena rat too, so it was fine. That was fine. But, like, this character had no reason to exist apart from dick measuring in the arena. That was the sole purpose of the character. And that can be fun, right? Everyone likes to power game every so often, right?
Gestalt is a thing.
Indeed. Everyone likes to power game every so often, but you grow out of it. There comes a point where you need your characters to have, like, motivations and personalities and
attachments to the world.
Attachments to the world and to other people. And
that little star is looking real good there, Rail.
Yeah, I do appreciate a sub for sure. But that's really what the problem with that character was. That it was just not ever designed to be a character. It was just a power set on a stick.
Jose Jalapeno on a stick.
I wasn't expecting you to go to that place, but I think it's okay that you went to that place. The other problem with that character is that he definitely, like, had too many special snowflake traits. Like, one of his required secondary powers was that he just knows where stuff is, so that he can make portals to it. And I decided that because he had that, he didn't really need eyes anymore, so he was blind. And
okay. Did he also have a sword?
No, he was not. He did not have a. He did not have a sword. His melee weapon was literally an electric guitar because I had just seen Fooly Cooley because I was 15. I'm not joking.
I know you're not.
I mean, I get it. Fooly Cooley is freaking awesome.
Should we maybe introduce our special guest friend?
Yes. So, to introduce our new guest, our current guest. So this is a person who we roleplay with in our current groups. She's in the Genius campaign that I run, and we've roleplayed together for some time. And go ahead and take it from here.
Hi, my name's Phoebe. I'm actually in the chat. Don't look for Phoebe because I'm right here. I've been role playing since I was 14. I'm 31 now, so don't make me do the math. I've done a little bit of most things. I haven't done any LARPing, but I'm usually kind of a fantasy cyberpunk nerd.
It's why she fits in so well with the rest of us.
Indeed.
You got bits, dude.
And we will get to your story, Phoebe.
God.
But since you are the guest, I think we're gonna let Steven take it.
Yeah, totally.
Because this is something that people who have not been a part of our group for long will not know about.
Oh, wait, hang on, Steve, before you do that. Oh my god, I just realized that your username is Don't Look for Phoebe, because you're right there.
Mm-hmm.
How did I never notice that?
The same way nobody ever noticed 706.
I thought that was that Borg from Voyager.
No, it was a magpie rhyme reference.
Well, no wonder I don't get it then. I'm sorry, Steve, please continue.
Just a bit of a topic so I can delay and vamp a little bit. Phoebe is also a member of our Vampire the Masquerade game that's running up with which Rail is a part of. You're playing filthy vampires. Okay, I guess I can't really delay this.
Oh, don't worry, man. Don't worry. We all have embarrassing tales.
Take it in slow. It'll be over before you know it.
So I need to preference this by saying, yeah, I need to start. So this character, Blade Arm, is a character I had up until let's say 4 years ago.
I really think that this character deserves to have his entire name said, Steven.
Yeah.
Because I made the character as my first ever roleplay character when I was 15, 16, over on the Rooster Teeth forums. The only name I could think of as a placeholder that just stuck was Steven Bladearm. Yeah, I was that guy. Oh, don't worry, boys and girls. It gets worse.
Tell us all about it.
Hold on, let me top off my bourbon again because I just want this to be really strong. I need to find synthetic strength to make through this.
Don't worry, we are all friends here. Even you, anonymous viewers on the internet.
So, I didn't know anything about roleplay. I maybe read a book or two. I think I had one of Paul S. Kemp. I had a book that he wrote in from the Halls of Stormweather, I think it was. It was the first book I ever read that had Irvis Kale in it. For those of you not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms setting, he's a very interesting character. Had a bit of a trek about him. Still has several novels. I recommend looking it up. Kemp's a great author. So that was about the most I knew.
And we've all been there. I mean, our new characters, they're things.
Out there?
You did.
That's really weird. That's been a bit bugging me. Anyway.
Yeah, you're back now, though.
Anyway, role playing. It looked interesting. I read through some of the stuff, and so I made a character. And at the time, the big anime that me and everybody else on the site was into was Naruto. So my character was a bit of a bastardized mix of Irvis Kale and a Naruto character for the longest period of time. And by longest period of time, I mean in excess of probably close to 8 or 9 years.
He was around that long? Holy crap.
So I made Blade Arm back before made Blade Arm back in my junior year of high school, maybe sophomore year of high school. So he was around literally from that point in time, the Rooster Teeth forums, to my first semester of college when somebody introduced me to the Keep. And then I brought him over to there, where the rest of you, well, most of you had the unfortunate, dubious pleasure of meeting him.
Ah, yes.
I think I never actually... No, I did, but that was after he came back.
Your story kind of ties into my next one, so we'll get to that, but do continue.
So, to describe Blade Arm's abilities, kind of start off, like I said, typical edgelord, assassin, Narutard running across trees, that kind of bullshit. I made him a bit of a shadow mage. His entire shtick was controlling shadows and light and using powers from the shadows. And it became refined over time. But for a period of time, it was just like the whole shtick was, I'm going to drop into my own shadow and pop up behind you. You know, what's the
personnel?
What's the old meme? No hard feelings, kid.
Nothing personnel.
Nothing personnel. Yeah, pretty much that. And he just went on this. A lot of the early stuff was just bad because at the time this RP was open to all kinds of characters, kind of centered around a mansion and a supreme being. I think Ghost Rider might have chased him once or twice because that was a thing in this roleplay. And so, yeah, that eventually stuck around until 2007 when I brought him over to the Keep. And, yeah, then he just kind of bummed around for a while, met various people. Wasn't really anything to speak of, just various occasional people I'd hang out with. So at the time, he wasn't really a bad character in terms of just everything else. The bad stuff comes much, much later.
Well, I mean, he did kind of still have the... I mean, I hear he still kind of had the edgy nothing personnel thing going, but...
He did have the kind of edgy nothing personnel thing, but unlike Brandon's, Arena Rat character, my guy was mainly there just to wander around and witness things, just kind of be the, person standing on the hilltop watching his shit goes down. That was his whole shtick for a long period of time. I made him well enough that he could defend himself if he had to fight. Not that it mattered much with all the planner bullshit being thrown around the Keep at the time for terms of God mode tier attacks.
Yeah, God, the God mode was really bad on that website.
It still is.
I was part of the problem, and I remember it being really bad.
Wait, the Keep is still around?
It is still around.
It still exists.
Holy
technically,
shit.
Technically, this is the worst part about it. Bladeharm still has not died yet. I still bring him into the Keep to lurk around. So this character has not been retired yet.
My deepest apologies for this link, but this is the website we're talking about.
Fair enough.
It's not all bad.
It's not all bad.
It really is mostly bad.
You still do have the ultra thirsty cyber crowd, and then occasionally the various God mode players will still show up. Anyway,
most of the God mode characters, or most of the old guard God moders have left, I think.
You mean us? Most of us have left.
I was most of the old guard God moders.
So for a long period of time, that was it. He would just wander around the forest and the pub and just meet various people and make friends and so on and so forth. He eventually ended up joining a group. How these people found out about me, I don't know. And so Bladearm joined this group called the Order of Makomi, which was supposed to be like a peaceful organization dedicated to upholding peace and justice and that whole plot line. except it didn't maintain that plot line very long because that's a different story. Anyway, somehow or another, Blade Arm ends up being one of the best fighters in the group, and so I go from being this relatively just like everybody recognizes a name, but nobody ever really knows me, to like, oh, there's 2-3 different groups now who know me, and some of them want to kill me. And so that began the power race.
Ah, there was an arms race. I wanted to hear about this.
So there's a period of time, like I said, with McComey, where Steven was in charge of the scouting and essentially the defense of the place, along with a few other powerful characters. And I'm trying to remember the name of the group, what they went by. Mephiston was part of the group.
Oh my god, that's a name that takes me back. We're not going to talk about that because I will say bad things about people.
Correct. So eventually that group came around, and Silver Moon was a thing at the time, and AG.
You're going to have to explain these terms because I don't know any of this. I was an arena rat.
All right, so you know enough about the Order of McComey from previous experiences and Steve's profile and all that shit.
Yes, but our viewers don't.
So the Order of McComey, like I said, as it started out, it was brought together just kind of a loose affiliation of characters that essentially became like a family to uphold truth, justice, and yada, 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 yada. Eventually, it goes from just a completely open, neutral group to we're locking the doors, this, that, and the other. Various captains and groups. The guild leader himself, I'm not going into because I will say bad things about people.
Right, we're endeavoring not to say bad things about people.
Right, so eventually, due to various circumstances, we end up on the radar of several different groups. Kind of make friends with a group that was called Kingdom of Silver Moon, which at the time, just imagine if you transposed Tuxedo Mask and actually Sailor Moon and just brought in random other fantasy characters to surround them and run a kingdom.
Can I interject on the bit of Silver Moon? Because
sure, because I didn't spend much time there.
Yes, everything you're saying on that, but it's a little bit stranger because apparently in that Kingdom of Silver Moon, Princess Selena was dating some ex-Marine guy named Jason.
I actually killed him in a fight once. It was glorious.
Thank God, because he tried to tempt me into some foot fetishist stuff, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Okay, things that we're not actually talking about today.
Anyway. And that character was not actually Steven. That was another character I specifically made for that purpose, and he accomplished his goal and was retired. But for the sake of Brandon, I essentially made a Chaos Marine.
Ah, good times. Wait, that was you?
No, they're probably thinking of a different Chaos Marine. I might have invaded. We might have invaded Silver Moon with Dr. Robotnik.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. That sounds amazing. What you have just described to me is Dr. Robotnik invading a kingdom run by Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask, surrounded with fantasy characters. This actually sounds fine.
Yeah, it's fine up until that point, except by and large, Jason was one of the God modders.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we're going a little off the rails. Let's focus on Steven.
Right, like I said, this is a different character, different story altogether. So we made an alliance with Silver Moon, which then made anybody who's after Silver Moon our enemies. Steve was friends with the Adventurers Guild at the time, so
again,
he would hang out
anything about that. But
the Adventurers Guild, it's a bit hard to pin down, but for a period of time, it was specifically just a group of wacky So imagine Fairy Tale in the Keep, except before Fairy Tale, and it was led by a it was essentially led by a mixture of a Warhammer Fantasy witch hunter and Indiana Jones.
Okay. Wait, isn't a Warhammer Fantasy Witch Hunter basically Indiana Jones?
Depends on which ones you're looking at. Some are
rate,
flagellants.
At any rate, so the tale of Stephen goes through the AG, and then what?
End up hanging out with a specific crowd of arena rats. Not you. This was before I met you, believe it or not.
Yes.
But because of the very alliances that were made and the fact that certain people from Macomb might have been, shit talking and doing other stupid bullshit behind the scenes that nobody ever copped to, but it's highly alluded to. Eventually, various ultra-powered groups who were kind of formed just for the sake of eliminating this group, which basically meant that the handful of people with any kind of fighting style characters had to defend it all. Thus began the arms race, where Steve's power went from the whole typical just running around and teleporting and things like that to throwing concentrated blades of dark energy.
Now, when you say dark energy,
just
remember that I was also an arena rat. So when you say dark energy, you have to clarify whether you mean weaponized darkness or literally the stuff that's making the universe expand.
Weaponized darkness.
Okay.
Was it Void Black?
That comes later. That comes in around about the same time. So he had a sword that was, by the person who gave it to Stephen, described as Void Black. Therefore, that was the description of that blade every time it came up. That was not me. I was just continuing something from a friend.
You were the one who continued doing it, though, so.
I maybe still do continue doing it. Either way.
That is unimportant, and we will discuss that later.
So it just eventually became to the point where weaponized shadows and darkness, using it as tendrils for traps and such. And by and large, the system itself wasn't terrible until I got to the point where, once again, nothing personnel, except I'm doing it on the scale of I'm popping out of the shadows beneath your clothing.
Yep, and now we're back again to what I said. Puppies appear anywhere.
Correct. Various other situations such as that. And we haven't even gotten to the worst aspects of the character yet. So at that time, eventually it was just enough of an echo chamber in the group where I was just like, oh yeah, you're the best fighter, you're so good, yada, 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 yada. My ego got inflated a bit with them. And so I thought I was hot shit.
Well, I mean... And what was the result of that?
The result of that was the inflated sense of self-worth that pervaded the character for an extended period of time, right up until we ended up in the wonderful, wacky land. God damn it, Phoebe. The wonderful, wacky land of Crossroads.
Right, and this was actually where we all met. The basic premise was it was just a island in the middle of nowhere where people from various settings basically got trapped, and it was it was a fine place to roleplay, but some shenanigans did occur, and we're going to talk about some of those because they do involve the character he's talking about and one of the characters I'm going to talk about later. Go ahead.
By and large, without me trying to, Blade Iron ended up being one of the key characters of the plot of that fucking island.
Right, so, and the reason for that was that, I don't remember. Please continue.
Eventually, everything started out kind of the same way. He was just a wandering mercenary, just kind of sitting back, not really engaging with many people other than being, a bit smarmy and edgelordy and all that random bullshit. until fighting stuff started happening, and a very specific event occurred. Where there was a certain plot where an investigation was occurring, and a character jumped on him and attacked him or whatever, and he might have gone above and beyond just controlling the situation by possibly shattering a child's ribs with a kick.
Okay, yes. Who hasn't, though? Who hasn't shattered a child's ribs?
It goes downhill from there. From that point on, instead of just being like a edgelordy character that not hated, just kind of devolves into a just massive case of villainy. So while on the island itself, which granted you couldn't have any licensed characters on there, so it was all original characters, all original snowflakes, as it were. So there's no magic, no tech on the island. So if you knew how to fight, you had an advantage, so on and so forth. There's a whole system involved. Eventually, it ends up just going off the fucking rails. I end up pissing off so many fucking people.
I never really understood precisely what happened. Like from one angle, it was very clearly Steven's fault, the stuff that went down. But I find myself sitting back and wondering precisely how.
I don't even remember anymore, man. I've been drinking too long since those days.
But anyway,
eventually it boiled down to the point where I was, and the character was just a dick to a lot of people. And a certain plot came up. Actually, no, the plot comes up later. I'm trying to remember the order of events. This is where things just go off the rail, and Steve just becomes the ultimate villain of the setting. There's
ultimate in the sense of final, like he was the last villain of this setting.
He was the last person standing in the setting.
I mean, that only means he won.
Correct. He became a god.
Oh my god! I forgot that happened.
Yes, indeed.
All right, do continue.
There came an event where the sheriff or one of the deputies of I forget what Silver's rank was at the time. I don't remember if it was actually sheriff or if it was deputy. There's an event where, as payback for an event that occurred, since she was a gunfighter, her whole thing was quick draws and things of that nature. He absolutely stuck a blade through her hand and made it so her primary gun hand would not function anymore.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so basically Steven stuck a blade through Silver's hand and made her gun arm useless.
Sure.
I forget what led to that specific point. Oh no, I do. It was the response to that was from a plot. We went on a plot to another realm because this island was surrounded by portals and this, that, and the other. We went on a mission to save some people or do a thing, and there came a point where, due to schedule conflicts, I couldn't play the entire time, and it became a point where my character was thrown into a valley to die. And then there's this whole arc where I made a different character, but was really still him in disguise, and came back to the island.
It was super obvious. We were all sure of it.
Yeah, everybody was sure of it. So he comes back and to plot his revenge as this other character. And then as he's trying to get information on the person who caused the pain, the person who threw him off the edge comes back around where he ends up essentially torturing Silver and, ruining her hand and getting the information and setting an elaborate trap. That then, yes, Tyler, he was wearing a fat suit of sorts. He was essentially wearing a suit that kind of just completely disguised his body because reasons. Yeah. So anyway, there was this entire elaborate plot of torture and revenge, and because I'm an idiot, I don't go through with the complete plot of revenge at all. Basically, end up letting the guy go and throwing myself on the graces of everybody else. Because at the time, I wanted everybody to like this character, and he ends up locked up. And there comes a point where, again, he's taken to another realm. He's tied up, and his hand is blown off with a shotgun, courtesy of the character whose hand he ruined before. And then he eventually ends up being a drag bottom of the barrel. Nobody doesn't really get played much. He's missing a hand, can't regrow it, and not allowed to carry any weapons. Just relegated to, a broken character. And then comes Blade Arm Palooza.
Ah, yes.
Where the goal is to seek revenge upon the entire island.
Right, but actually, I always had a question about that. Where did the cultists come from?
In Steve's previous life as the scout captain of the Order of Makomi, he formed a bond with his group of scouts that just basically became fanatical, and they became his own little private hit squad.
That's why we're talking about this, yes. Continue, please.
Indeed. I just love that you refer to them as cultists, because that is actually the best description for these guys.
They were, yes.
Whole elaborate schemes are put in place to ambush various characters, and I might have run a player off during one of the ambushes.
Yeah, we did lose at least one player to that, but
a whole 9 yards of going through and just kind of murdering everybody. I forget all the specifics, but it came down to a person was met. I'm trying to remember if Silver was killed around this time.
Yeah,
she was. He killed Silver, but he got a javelin to the face, courtesy of Silver. And so his cultists decided the best idea at this time, since he wasn't dead yet, was to take over the town hospital and clinic and have the doctors try to save him, while also striking other facilities on the island and taking them over or destroying them.
A character I'm going to talk about later killed a lot of people during this.
A lot of people died in this. We get to the point where it's the final showdown after the various strikes have been done. It's just the clinic. Everybody holed up in the clinic is left. And they're still trying to save Steven. And while the fighting is going on, the doctor basically kills him, slits his throat. Or he dies on the table. I forget what specifically happens. All I know is that while all this is happening, he dies, and then the last surviving cultists decided it's a good idea to flay the doctor alive. No, flay the assistant alive and give the doctor a blood eagle. And then came the end times.
Oh my god, this story's still not... This character died and it's still not over.
This character died. So when we were ending this setting, if you remember, we...
Yeah, no, I recall.
We just allowed any character to be brought back, just like, look, just bring them all back and we'll have fun with it. So Blade Arm came back.
Oh, he killed one of my best characters.
Which one did I kill?
Rickard.
Oh yeah, Rickard. He came back and just murdered a bunch of people. Like killed Rickard, killed our buddy Caleb's character, desecrated a corpse.
Yeah, but who hasn't involved himself in
who hasn't already?
Right?
Right. So at this point, eventually, it just boiled down to he ended up being the last person alive on this island, and became a god?
Question mark? The the specifics are less important, but
Yes,
Keep in mind.
that raises a good point. Caroline and Steven faced off for godhood, and Steven ended up winning.
This character was supposed to be not a good guy, but like an anti-hero.
He wasn't even supposed to be. He was supposed to be closer to like neutral than anything else.
Yeah.
And then everything, just through course of various RPs over the years, he just went off the fucking rails.
In fact, that's kind of what I wanted to ask. Like, it's one thing to just sit and tell stories about our worst RP experiences, but I feel like we also have to kind of address this. Where did it go wrong? Like, what was the problem with the character? Like,
in terms of his abilities, the cringiest part of him was the fact he had enhanced healing. But since, as I said earlier, he was originally based off of a mixture of Irvis Kale from the Paul S. Kemp's Shadow. I've got the book somewhere. Basically, it's a servant of mask. He's a shade from Forgotten Realms D&D, which their whole thing is they control shadows. Their body's partially made out of shadows, and they heal really quickly. The cringiest part of him was how fast he healed in general. Plus, the dropping through shadows and stuff. That's just a trope.
It's, God, just like, it is the most. It's like the thing you think of when you think of an OC Do Not Steal, right?
Right. It's like literally the first thing that came to mind because, like I said, Naruto was big back then, and I started reading this guy's books, and there may have been a bit of Drizzt thrown in there too because I started reading Salvador.
Speaking of Drizzt,
we'll get there, but I really want to break some of these characters down and like what worked, what didn't work. Like in my example, what worked was the kind of ridiculous power set because that was sort of the setting he was in. What didn't work was the lack of there being any other character there.
Right. That kind of makes sense in terms of Steven, and like the progression and everything. Like that's just the whole storyline and everything. Aside from the fact he's an idiot and doing all this stupid shit, like that's a hell of a story arc to follow through, though.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like maybe the problem was that character existed for too long?
I'm pretty sure that's what ended up happening to him. I became too close to the character. I didn't want to see him go, so I wouldn't allow anything to really happen. And, things like that.
Right. And I kind of agree, but is that kind of the source of most of these problems, or is it like just a side note, or was there something intrinsically wrong with the character, or was it kind of the way it ended up being played that was the problem?
That kind of dovetails into my story, in which case it is absolutely the character that is wrong.
Excellent. So let's go ahead.
I think we can come back at the end of the podcast and just kind of do a roundup of everything and cover those points a little bit more clearly.
Right,
let's move on to Phoebe's story.
Well, we have a natural thing. Yeah, go ahead, Phoebe.
Okay, so you two are familiar with a lot of the characters during the long slew of just creative splurge I had, where I had all these half-baked characters that lasted about a week and then vanished.
I'm also familiar. I'm familiar with that, not only from that creative spurt, but also from the various RPs we've done since we've met.
Yeah, those characters were bad, but they had backstories and personalities. I'm gonna go all the way the fuck back to when I was 14 and initially starting. This character did not have a personality. This character did not have a background. This character did not have a future or a plan or a goal. They just existed. And for those of you who don't know me very well, I'm a huge fan of Michael Moorcock. This is before I discovered Discworld and why character development is so important. And generally, I had all these aesthetic ideas, and I decided to use all of them at once when I was making my first character. I had heard about dark elves, and I did not know.
No!
I did not know what they were. I had no clue.
Wait.
No, I knew what elves were, and I thought dark elves must be cooler elves.
I mean, I would argue that dark elves are, in fact, cooler elves, but...
Not in this way.
Oh.
So...
They can be ultra-brooding edgelords, or they can be really good characters. I'm interested to see where this goes.
Well, let me start this off by saying the character's name initially, because I was 14 and I had no idea what I was doing, his name initially was Dark Elf as a screen name.
Go on.
I mean, that's not the worst screen name I've heard of.
No, and in fact, I've had worse ones.
It's no fortune.
But
no, the worst screen name you ever heard of was Stephen Bladeharm.
No, I mean, kind of. But what I'm saying is, right? Like, you know, dark elf. Okay, sure, fine. It makes more sense than the screen name. I don't know. I said
706
already, so let's stick to that.
This character initially started as a elf that was self-described as a dark elf that carried a bow and a bunch of shurikens, and he used to sit at a table in this place called the Green Dragon Inn back on this old chat server called Chat Planet. And his way
wait, Green Dragon, wasn't there a webcomic around a place called Green Dragon Inn?
Potentially. I don't actually know the history of the place, only that it was on Chat Planet and it got shut down. Anyway.
Why did it get shut down?
I imagine no money, but... Anyway. So, his way of initiating speech, which he was mute because I had no idea how to write dialogue and I was worried about people judging me for it, his way of initiating character interaction was to throw a shuriken at whoever lit a cigarette in the room.
What?
No, go on.
Not at them. He would slice the cigarette in half. You know, just that whole cocksure bullshit. And usually it was like I would feel all proud of myself, and they would go, "Well, I guess he doesn't like cigarettes," and then they would go back to whatever role play they were doing, and I would feel like, "Yay, I interacted with somebody." And
that's adorable.
That's how I used to be. That character evolved, and even more aesthetics got attached to him. They became a 12-year-old kid carrying a large sword that was bone white called Arya that had no mythical specific abilities, but it was definitely legendary, and it was definitely mythical, and it was definitely 32 times his size.
Whoa, only 32 though?
That's an exaggeration. I don't remember the exact measurement.
I can tell you about some size differences, but go ahead.
Yeah. And he would just drag it behind him, and supposedly the story was he used to be evil, which he was 12 years old, so looking back on that, it's like, what time did he have to be evil in? And the sword was making him become a good person.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I am fully aware. And it had become this thing where I would go into the Green Dragon Inn with this dark elf who grew a name, and he started calling himself Archaon Darkwood. Yeah, I know. And he would make a beeline for whatever matronly character was in the Green Dragon Inn at the time. And then I would just spend a few hours with them, and they would mom around and whatnot. Meanwhile, I'm this fucking dark elf kid sitting on a bed with a sword that's larger than I am. Yeah, cringe.
No, your story has reminded me of a character that I had forgotten I ever had. Please continue.
It gets worse. I do this for about a year, give or take. Like I said, details are kind of fuzzy. I come back, and Archaon has evolved. He is now no longer a dark elf. He was a dark elf, and he has that as a part of his backstory. I am using the previous roleplay as a backstory, despite how little sense it makes. And he's about 6 feet tall, He's got 6 arms, he's got 6 wings, and he is wielding 3 two-handed swords, one of which is Arya, of course, and 3 heater shields, which I described as kite shields because I didn't know what a heater shield was.
Uh,
Don't ask me how it worked.
Where did the 6 elves come from, and why did you and God of War separately come up with dark elves being insectile?
You're asking me these questions, and I was like 14 to 16. Yes, Archaon is evolving. And I fell in with this guy named Keelik. And Keelik was cool. Keelik was one of these guys that, all these other people are creating these deep, intricate, romantically related plots and, all sorts of baddies coming in to just sow chaos and seeds of havoc. And Keelik would just go in and solve all the problems and then leave. That was what he did. He played the ninjutsu ninja gargoyle. No, don't ask me. It's like I asked him one time and he said, it's like the gargoyles from the TV show. And I'm like, oh, okay. I think I know what you're talking about. Anyway, we're doing all that. Archaon gets a citadel. And the citadel is basically this place where he plans, like, oh, all these places are like getting attacked by things, and I go through portals to save them, and that's what I do. And Keelik's like, cool, I want to join in. And so we do that for a while. And eventually, I grow out of him. Eventually, I realize this is a character that I don't really know how to play other than to get into random death matches with people and fuck up everything for them, and I don't want to do that anymore. I vanish for a long time. But I come back and I realize something. The place where I ended up playing Archaon last, where I met Keelik, was not the Green Dragon Inn. Chat Planet had shut down. The place where I met Keelik and played for like 2 years, playing Archaon Darkwood, this Omni with too many limbs, just way too many, was not the Green Dragon Inn where anything goes. It was the Theater des Vampires, where people were trying to use Vampire the Masquerade rules in a chat room setting.
Sounds reasonable so far.
Oh.
And that's where I was playing this character alongside Keelik, the Gargoyle Ninja. This entire fucking time.
Fair enough.
Like, the moment I realized it, and the moment I knew what Vampire the Masquerade was, I was like, maybe I should go make a vampire. And of course, that one didn't turn out any better. It was Remora, who was just made my own clan, and it was such bullshit. But she was infinitely better. She was infinitely better than Archaon ever could have been.
Okay, look, you do at least have the distinct honor of potentially being the only person in all of history to think to themselves, man, this character's bad, I should go make a vampire.
So Pat in the chat brings up a very interesting question. What's this about the clan that you made to make this vampire character?
Okay, so I, in a very, very vague sense, understood Vampire the Masquerade. Like, I got the whole vampires in different clans that gave them different abilities, and I understood that you could diablerize other vampires. So, in an effort to try and kind of redeem my name, because this wasn't the GDI where people just popped in and out, this was, kind of a constant base of role players. I came up with this clan called the Male Rim that Remora was a part of. And the Male Rim were basically like hyper regenerating. Thank you, Stephen. They had this thing where they didn't go from fledgling to full vampire easily. They had to enter this kind of cocoon state that was, today I understand as being very close to torpor. And then they would immediately frenzy and be like super powerful in their frenzy. And I didn't understand the Vampire the Masquerade rules at the time, but that's the character that I came up with. And oddly enough, most people were pretty cool about it. Even though, as I said before, I didn't even know who she was before she got turned. You know, I didn't know who she was as a vampire. She was just kind of your standard emo, I want to snuggle up next to people vampire. And then bite their throats, of course.
Cuddle vamps.
A bit Shaltier-ish.
Yeah, she was the kind of person that would lick your neck and not find anything wrong about it.
Yeah, but Shaltier is an eldritch abomination who just happens to look like that most of the time.
Correct.
So I don't know Shaltier.
We're talking about Overlord. So
we will watch it with you at one point.
Yeah, it's actually super good. So your story about Archeon, right, brings to mind a character I played once. Not once. I played for several months.
Oh God, did you have one too?
Kind of.
I don't think it... No, wait. No. I had something resembling a vampire. Continue.
Now, I do not remember I do not remember this character's name. But I do remember that the character was a human child named Mark. But I don't remember his name. His name was Marcus. And that was not the character. That wasn't the character at all. Because what had happened was this 10-year-old kid had stumbled upon a sentient magic sword.
Oh, boy!
That had immediately and completely possessed him. So the
that
character was actually a magic sword.
I like this already.
So far, it does not sound like a terrible character. I'm waiting for the plot twist.
Well, actually, I don't know if this was a terrible character or not, but... So, basically, what the story of the sword, right, was that there was this obsessed swordsmith who wanted to make the perfect sword. And he failed miserably, right? Like, he made pretty decent swords. He didn't even know magic, but he made magic swords because he was just that obsessed with it.
I mean, it sounds... It's a bit tropey and, everything, but it's, standard, not terrible yet.
So... In his endless obsession, he eventually threw himself into the forge in an attempt to make the magic sword he wanted through self-sacrifice.
That is a jump in
Yes.
That is a jump in logic.
No, it was an eventual thing. Like in the backstory, he became more and more frustrated with his inability to make this thing that he was imagining in his head. So he did that. He killed himself to create this sword, and the magic sword is sentient, but it's not actually like the guy. It's not the magic sword is sentient, but it's not like the ghost of a swordsmith in there. It's just he made a sentient sword. And the sword decided, after accidentally killing 3 or 4 different wielders, that it was not the problem. The problem was none of these people were good enough. So what he decided to do, he decided to find a kid, just any kid, and then forge that kid into a decent wielder.
Ooh.
Again, this sounds pretty cool in the plot of a story in and of itself.
This was not necessarily a bad character. I'm just saying that, like, this is what the character was, and I was reminded of it. But what really bothered me about this character, okay, is that as I was playing this character, I very specifically had this kid, this 10-year-old kid, talk in, like, a super adult way, right? Like extremely deep grasp of concepts, a vocabulary no 10-year-old should ever have, a complete refusal to ever put down the giant sword that you're not actually sure how he's lifting. And at no point Did a single person I was playing with ever question any of that?
Yeah, wow. That seems par for the course in the keep.
I think that just seems par for the course in like freeform RP anyway. I mean, to be fair, that's strange and interesting. It's not as strange as some shit I've seen.
That's true. And I didn't mean to, like, tell a story about a character that wasn't necessarily god-awful. Although, I mean, it kind of was. Like, there was some bad stuff about the power set, but not about the character, really. I wanted to get that off my chest because I literally just now remembered that character ever existed.
Wow. God. Making connections between things that are horrible and things that are great.
I don't know that I'd call that character great. There were definitely some major issues, not least of which was, like, the backstory being super cliche and, well, the power set being stupid.
I mean, there's nothing original under the sun.
Okay, actually, you know what? I can explain exactly why the power set was stupid. It was part of the backstory.
Go ahead, then. This will make it fit within the context of what we're doing.
This will now fit. So, remember, this sword was made by a magic swordsmith who could not make a good enough magic sword, right? Well, the way he made it was by melting down every single magic sword he'd ever made. So, when you...
From a logistical standpoint alone, that's problematic.
I want you to think about every weapon enchantment you can think of. Because this had it.
Oh, yep. That'll do it.
Yep. That was what made it stupid. That is why it was stupid.
We're not even talking about your standard D&D weapon enchantments like Keen and Flame and all that other bullshit. This is getting into the fucking thing like, let's look at Black Clover. It's just anti-magic. Done.
It did not have anti-magic, but it was basically indestructible.
You know what I'd pay money for, though?
What's that?
A fight between your kid's swordsman and Archaon.
Now I just suddenly super want to do that because I just feel like...
If that happens, can Blade Arm be the ref?
Oh, hell yes.
Okay, well, this is a thing that's going to happen now. I have to dig up my... I have to dig through my notes and see if I still have the notes on the magic sword character.
The problem is that I never had, like, a list of spells for Archaon. He just kind of did whatever I wanted him to do at the time.
But, okay, so the magic sword had every enchantment on it, basically, but it could only use one at a time.
Oh.
So it was halfway balanced. That said, some of the enchantments were broken, let's say.
I think if we do this, then I'm just going to not have him have any spells.
Did you have, like, piercing or something that just said, fuck your defense?
It did have that. It did have that. It did have... It had an enchantment that when it was active, it would ignore all armor. It had another enchantment that said... God, I don't remember the exact wording because I don't have this in front of me, but it had an enchantment on it that basically said each time this weapon attacks, it attacks 3 times.
Oh wow, that's
Okay, to be fair, that sounds like a pretty wicked enchantment. It sounds like a high-level enchantment you can put on a blade, but it does sound fucking hilarious.
And fun.
Like, spectral blades or spectral blade or some kind of shit like that, where you swing and then, like, as you're swinging, there are spectral after images of the blade that come through and hit the target as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. It also, obviously, it had every elemental enhancement it could just pick. It couldn't use 2 at once, but it could just pick between them. And I say it because the wielder had exactly 0 control.
So basically, the sword picked, the kid possessed, swung. I'm trying to think of that interaction.
I imagine at this point the kid is just a vessel.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
It was exactly like Nightmare from Soul Calibur.
Oh, I like Nightmare.
I mean, except that the kid wasn't like mutating, but still.
It would have made it better then.
Yeah, it was it was literally just a magic sword possessing a human child. That's what it was.
It reminds me of this story about an ogre that finds like some paladin's sword. There's like a D&D story. This ogre ends up turning good because the sword enforces an alignment change.
When you started talking about an ogre, I thought you started talking about Augie there for a second, which is a sad story.
It's not sad. He becomes like frickin' part of the dwarven pantheon.
Is he a tactics ogre?
No.
Oh my god. I don't know where the hell that compulsion comes from. I can't hear the word ogre without thinking tactics ogre. I don't know why.
I mean, you live on the internet?
I do live on the internet.
I've always been more partial to Final Fantasy Tactics.
Okay, so I told another story. Who's next?
I mean, I could dig back, and I wish somewhere out there on the internet, and I would love for anybody to fucking find this shit. There's a website that I used once upon a time because computers continue to crap out. I made just a record of the various characters I had, their sheets and everything, just so I could have a place to keep them all. And I lost it the last time my computer died, so I don't know where it is anymore.
Well, okay, so you think about that, and I'll talk about some more of the characters I've made, because a lot of them are bad. Like, bad in different ways, but bad.
I mean, I can think. Give me a second. Let me, you start your story, and I'll think of Stu a bit, because I might be able to pull into some other things that might be construed as bad.
So Nick and I once created an entire shared bad universe of bad characters.
Was it bad?
It was not great. So what it was it was a sci-fi faction of what were basically space cops. Like, they had a very specific set of rules they enforced that basically came down to destroying everything that looks like a human and isn't.
This sounds a bit like a faction from Infinity.
It's also a bit like a couple factions in 40K. But, so, the existence...
Of Imperator, bitch!
Yes, of Imperator. The existence of this faction basically was just to hunt through the freeform roleplay site and try to kill all the elves, all the anthros, all the dwarves, all the
gnomes.
Yep. Well, no, gnomes were okay because they did not look human by our definition.
Halflings?
Halflings look too human.
Oh, I like halflings.
And Brandon and Nick made characters that just killed them all.
Yep, that was the whole goal. That was the entire goal. And they were other than that, they were space police. And they made their living as a faction just doing mercenary police work. Like factions would hire them to keep the peace in their sectors because they had big ships and very few scruples. So...
This is the fucking peacekeepers from Farscape.
Also that, yes. And I had not seen Farscape at the time, but yes.
Fair enough.
So I had 4 or 5 characters involved in this. Now, there were several races that I developed that were basically essentially humans. They were just human plus, like your standard technological creatures that were basically cyborgs but had super special technology stuff. Like, oh my god, I can tell you about the dumbest thing I ever made.
Go on.
It was called the deletion array.
Wait, I think you told me about the. Is the deletion array from the fucking alien with the hover bike with the fucking macro battery on it?
No. That character didn't have access to that.
You have to talk about that character at some point.
I will. We're gonna get there. So one of the characters had access to the deletion array, which was, and I am not shitting you. So this was my actual explanation for this weapon.
Everybody brace yourselves. I've heard this thing. It's amazing. Fucking god-awfully, terribly funny.
It is the best. And by the best, I mean the worst. So, here's what happened, right? So, this particular race's faster-than-light travel is based on the concept of quantum entanglement. So what it is, or the way it works, is at some point, somebody created a computer simulation of the universe, okay? The whole thing. That was just exact. It was perfect. And because it was...
Just interrupt. That's the Vex from Destiny, for people who say Destiny has no story.
Yes. And because it was perfect, because the simulation was exactly perfect, it meant that every single particle in the simulation was entangled with every single particle in real life. So changing the position of a particle within the simulation would cause that particle to teleport in real life. That's how their faster-than-light travel worked.
So what you're just saying is there was quantum entanglement on a universal scale.
Exactly. Well, not even really that. It's just, it is specifically, this because the simulation is perfect, changing it makes the real world change.
I actually kind of like that explanation for faster-than-light travel.
However, they used this technology to create a weapon called the deletion array. Guess why it's called that?
It's just a delete command.
It literally scans the target and sends that computer back home a delete command. It erases it from existence.
Yep, it's as bad as it sounds. Now, just for Phoebe's sake, if you like interesting methods of faster-than-light travel, this is a recommendation for everybody who hasn't read it. Look up the webcomic Schlock Mercenary. It might be some of the best I've ever seen.
It was, God, that was bad. But now, I'm going to talk about this.
My pitch or your fucking thing?
What?
What, my pitch or your fucking thing?
No, my thing. I'm sorry. You can pitch all you like. But I'm also going to talk about another character who was involved in this same thing, right? The faction's name.
I think I found one, actually. I remember one.
I think so.
So, I have one, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So, for a period of time, while Steve was on hiatus or various other things, I made another character. I interacted with a friend of mine who made a RP called the Kingdom of Chaos.
We need for chaos.
Go ahead, Phoebe.
I know the Kingdom of Chaos. I had a character that ran a job for them once.
Tell me if you remember this character, then. Back on the Keep?
It was back on the Keep.
Yeah, that was probably there. So people in the group may or may not, from the Crossroad days, may or may not remember the character Nome. She was like Steve's mute elven plant wizard, like adopted sister type thing. Well, she also had a RP that she started up one time called the Kingdom of Chaos. It was an older idea from another site, form RPs. And she brought it back and asked if I wanted to take part. Sure. The entire premise of the Kingdom of Chaos was it was a kingdom dedicated to anything that is not human. So the antithesis of your space cops, Brandon. It was a kingdom for elves and dwarves and halflings, but also eldritch abominations like beholders and Yog-Shoggoths and shit like that. So that was by and large the population of the kingdom, right?
I want to see a kingdom that's inhabited by Shoggoths.
Well, this kingdom was. The character I made for this was not a high-ranking character, and he's not bad for his fucking story. More so, he was bad for the power set he used.
I feel like this power set thing, it keeps coming back again and again. Tell me all about it, though.
All right, so the character I made, his name was Thuth Rodoth. And at the time, I had started playing Blaze Blue on 360.
You just dated yourself, but all right.
Yes, I just dated myself. Fuck it, I'm 29. Shit.
You're only 29?
Yeah, I'm only 29. I'm haggard by alcohol and other things.
Huh.
Anyway, so Thuth's entire shtick was he was a leader of the Special Forces in the Kingdom of Chaos, mainly because I was one of the top people in, and I didn't want to play a fucking a politician character. I wanted to play a combat character, and that was what was open, so yeah, I took it. Thuth's whole shtick was he was a blood mage of sort. And the Blaze Blue connection comes in with the fact that his primary weapon was a sword that could change into a scythe.
Wait. I know this one. I know this one because it is Legacy of Kain.
Ragnar the Blood Edge from Blaze Blue.
Legacy of Kain is Bay.
Anyway, so that was the kind of the idea I had for his weapon. His power set, though, was his armor. He walked around when he wasn't on combat missions. He just had armored sleeves, armored legging, armor to protect his legs and everything. And then he just walked around the rest of the time bare chested, just crisscrossed with scars. Because the shtick was his armor had these hooks and blades that locked into his system. So while he's using blood magic in full armor, all he has to do is flex a certain way, and he cuts himself and bleeds so he can channel his blood magic.
Like kind of like the Berserk armor.
I was gonna say it reminded me of Guts.
Except he's not a mage. In fact,
Also, I don't think the armor exactly hurts you. I think it just keeps you going when you're hurt.
I mean,
so it's like so Thuth's whole shtick was his body was just a complete patchwork of scars that kept healing and being redone. So he had an enhanced healing edition just so he could keep up with the amount of blood magic he used, because it's not just like one or two parts. Every bit of his armor, from his helmet to his vambraces, his greaves, his cuirass, his codpiece.
Why did you
everything
have to say the codpiece?
Because I'm drunk and it's funny.
Okay, continue.
Just had hooks and blades and everything you would need to, cut his body and draw forth his blood, which he would use in the form of blood rituals and blood bullets and basically power boosts along his blade. The issue from that comes from with how much he has to move in a fight, just how much he would bleed during a fight. So this fucking healing factor is just like Wolverine and Deadpool to the nth degree, ridiculously powerful. So he's virtually unkillable.
The healing factor aside, this did not get bad until you mentioned codpiece, blood magic, and bladed interior.
Yeah, the bladed interior codpiece just kills it. Like, I don't want to hear about that. That's bad. That's like. You ever see the movie Teeth?
Yep.
Ugh.
Teeth is a documentary about Steven's character.
Ugh.
I did say this is one of my worst characters I've ever made. But see, so in terms of time factor, this was 10 years. It seems like it was at least maybe 8 years or so after I initially made Blade Arm. So this was the first major character I made after that.
Whew. I mean, look, on the surface, it's not so bad. If it was like a quarter less edgy, right? Like 20% less edgy. And,
right.
And, had maybe less blood, some blood still, and some sort of like way to keep track of it so that when your character's out of blood, you're out of blood.
Right, like I said, this was a bad character design, but in terms of the backstory and I went too far with how the armor and everything interacted with everything, but like, it was not a bad character. Yes, 100% less barbed codpiece.
Yes.
Can we get that on a shirt?
I mean, I think so.
Probably.
Now with 100% less barbed codpiece.
So, like I said, it's like, it was not, in terms of backstory, the character was fine. In terms of ability set, the character was probably fine. Until you factor in that he's, doing all this as some form of not quite human character. Also, he was another character that led a group of elite fucking soldiers.
What is it with you and leading elite soldiers?
I was also reading the works of Dan Abnett at the time, so I was really addicted to the thought of like the ghosts and everything.
Oh, ghosts.
Very much Tom Clancy.
A little different. But so their whole shtick was it was essentially just a placeholder until we got, hopefully would get enough characters to, come in and play and do other things. Just a way to, as filler and things like that. But another thing that makes them bad, the name of this particular special operations group was the Blood Pact.
Of course it was.
I did say this was one of my bad characters.
It's true. That's what we're here for. That is what we're here for.
Rail points out a good thing. Yes. This is why I'm drinking kind of more than I normally would for this kind of thing, which is still probably enough to kill a lesser man.
The lesser men are weak.
I'm feeling a little tipsy. Mostly, I think I'm relieved at finally having talked about Archaon, because I have never done this, I don't think. Not since coming here have I ever said a word about him.
I'm glad that we're all getting our trauma off our chests. Is that what we're doing?
It's cleansing. It's relaxing. It's...
Yes, Rail, as you say, I do run on alcohol.
So I want to talk about another space cop.
Oh boy.
What is with you and space cops? What? You get on him about having cultists, but you've got a couple space cops.
They were all part of the same. They were part of the same setting.
Ah, that makes sense.
Wait a second, motherfucker. You're pointing out the fact that I'm running a fucking group with, cultists and shit. My newest fucking character has cultists, more or less.
Huh, yeah, I guess he does. But it's the World of Darkness. I mean, you just end up with cultists in World of Darkness. You almost can't...
No, motherfucker. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about Will and the fact that you play one of my cultists.
Those are not... Okay, look. No. Those are not cultists, okay? And the reason they're not cultists is because you're just their boss. Like, you are actually their superior in, like, a military sense. That's not a cult.
Case in point, that's how Steve's group started out, and then it just went downhill.
That is true. Anyway, I'm going to tell you about another space cop. So...
I will have a rebuttal after you finish your story, by the way.
Okay. So the third race... Not the reptilians. I mean the third race in the setting that I made for these space cops. So what I'm hearing, Distorted Truth says, so what I'm hearing is Scientology should rebrand themselves to a private military. Let's not have that happen, actually.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Anyway, the third race, so there were humans, and then there were the cyborgs that all came from one planet. I forget what it was called. Ix, maybe? Because I think I stole it from Dune. That makes sense. There was a third one. And the third ones were Galatian, and they came from, or we think Yes, it was never very clear, but we think that they were actually a hybrid between Homo sapiens and like the Greys, gray aliens.
Okay, so wait. I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with this. So these are space cops from the same setting as the last ones you mentioned?
Yes.
And their entire thing is to go out and wipe out things that look human but are not human?
Yes. So these guys kind of flew under the radar because they're human they're human enough. Like when you look at the DNA, they appear to be human.
So what you're saying is they're massive fucking hypocrites.
Yes, that is precisely what I'm saying.
Wait, isn't this kind of like Cylons?
And actually, there were only, now that I think about it, there were only 2 of these guys in the actual, like, Space Cops. The rest of and they were there, now that I think about it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about this character. So, okay, to adjust, this one character was in the Space Cops from this race. Nobody else was. And the reason for that was because he was using the Space Cops to kill off all the rest of his people.
Wow.
Go on.
So, the character... Okay, so this was basically his backstory. This race of people had genetic memory. They were able to remember the things their ancestors experienced, you know, going way back.
Wait, I'm sensing a pattern with you in characters with genetic memory.
Why do you say that?
Hover bike macro cannon.
This is who I'm talking about.
It is?
It is. This is that character.
You did not cover this aspect of everything. All right, y'all are going to be entertained with this shit.
Okay. Anyway, so they have genetic memory. They remember stuff going way, way, way back. And a while back, many generations back, they apparently did something. I don't know what. But whatever it was so horrible that it made this character want nothing more than to destroy the entire race for generations. Like, he would breed, or like the character would breed, and their kid would inherit this obsession. Like generations and generations of genocidal maniac.
This is some Saiyan bullshit.
Generations of genocidal maniac.
I mean, to be fair, that does not sound like a terrible thing for a race in general in terms of, like, creating a character.
But another thing that this race had going for them was because they had genetic memory, they had access to kind of ridiculous technologies, like technologies that they may not be more powerful than stuff like the deletion array, but they are weirder. There's stuff that doesn't make sense, let's say. So this character had 3 pieces of equipment. The first was an object that looked a lot like a baseball bat. It wasn't literally a baseball bat, but it kind of looked like one. It was shaped like one. And
were you watching Paranoia Agent at the time?
I was not. It was, like I said, it's a cudgel. Okay, it's a mace. It's shaped kind of like a baseball bat because it is a cudgel.
It's a blackjack.
Basically, except that there was some kind of super science in it that would cause it to gain mass when swung.
I'm sorry, what?
If you swing it, it gets heavier.
Sounds a bit like a thunder... Well, no, it sounds nothing like a thunder hammer, but it sounds like it'd be useful for one.
It's like a grav hammer is what it's like.
Oh, grav hammers.
Like it was actually almost literally a Halo grav hammer.
We should play Halo sometime.
I don't happen to have it anymore. Anyway. And another piece of equipment he had was a jet bike. It was about, well, it was kind of big for a bike, for like a bike, like a motorbike. It was about double the size of a motorbike, now that I think about it. And it could fly. and it was pretty fast, and for some reason it was space-worthy. This was also never explained. Like, this character's thing was this shit is never explained.
In terms of the hover bike, anybody familiar with 40K, just look at like a Dawn Eagle jet bike or anything like that.
So it's completely open-topped, and he's not wearing a suit, but it's totally space-worthy for some reason. Force fields? Who knows? And then his last piece of equipment, Steven has mentioned this twice now, a macro laser. When I say that, the 40K fans will know exactly what I mean. But for everyone else, I literally mean a laser cannon that was intended for use on a spaceship.
Huh.
Yep.
This weapon was close to 15 feet long, weighed over 4 tons, and he wielded it one-handed.
Because reasons.
Well, because he's got some kind of super science that made it lighter, just like he made the bat heavier.
Gravity is a bitch.
Isn't it, though? So this character's thing was jetting around on a jet bike at the speed of Hax while firing the biggest laser in all creation at, well, you.
I would say it's at least a solid 7 on the biggest lasers in the history of creation.
Well, the biggest one that's ever been carried by a human being, anyway.
Right. I don't see human beings carrying around a GDI ion cannon.
Human enough, let's say. And that was it. That was that character. His whole thing was killing everybody else for a crime that they all remember that he will not tell anyone about. And in order to do that, he was working with the space cops, and working with the space cops meant shooting giant lasers at elves.
That's like random deathmatch the character.
I mean, again, I was an arena rat.
So, Phoebe, it's been me and Brandon talking for a while. You got any other characters you want to share with us?
Honestly, I don't have any that could top Archaon. Like in terms of pure, raw badness that lasted long enough to be really cemented as bad. I could talk about maybe Lady Hawkeye, but I didn't play her.
No. This is the worst characters you've ever made, so you can't talk about anyone else's characters.
Yeah, I know.
We're all friends here. We're not going to call anybody out.
Lady Hawkeye. I've not heard that name in forever.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
She got around.
Hey, Brandon, do you want me to talk about that fucking Chaos Marine character while Phoebe thinks?
No, I don't think so. If Phoebe doesn't have anything, then I can talk about the last thing I want to talk about, and then we can really do a roundup and, like, try to get to the heart of what made all these characters so bad.
Well, yeah, I might try to think if I have any more bad characters, but I think by that point, I'd started making characters like Parker or Addie or Pax and other things like that.
Right, those characters were all fine. That's my ringing endorsement. They're fine.
Unless I dive into my Mythweaver sheets and see what horrors I have in there.
I really feel like nothing in D&D is going to be as bad as oh my god.
Driss.
Go on.
Oh, I just thought of my worst D&D character.
I'll look for mine while we go over that.
It was a D20 modern character. For a game that lasted maybe 2 sessions with some people I didn't know. And, like, God, I don't remember hardly anything about this, but the character was like a new agey scam artist, right? Like he sold crystals or whatever. But he was also secretly a sorcerer. And by secretly a sorcerer, I mean he found out halfway through the first session that he was a sorcerer.
Oh.
And
what a nice surprise.
the problem is, when I say that, okay? When I say new agey scam artist who sells crystals finds out that he's a sorcerer, that actually sounds fine for a D&D character, like for a D20 modern character.
Absolutely.
It sounds
the problem
hilarious.
is that would require you to be kind of a good fast talker and have like a sense of confidence, a sense of, well, selling things to people. I did not have any of those things because I was 16 and I was an awkward kid. So this character who is supposed to be this like fast-talking scam artist ends up A, completely unable to even try to tell lies, right? Not even like a little bit. And B, ends up like throwing around sorcerer spells that he just figured out a second ago, like he was born to them. Which I guess technically was, but
That sounds typically sorceress to me.
but you would think that oh hey, I can cast magic spells. Maybe you think about it for a second before you figure out all your magic spells.
I mean, it's not like you're a mage who's completely dedicated to explosion magic and only have one spell you can cast once per day.
No, that's every character I play.
I mean, I also watch Konosuba.
And 8-bit theater.
In fact,
Yep.
My current character is a lizard wizard.
My current character is a flaming wizard.
Now, when you say flaming,
He's an Ifriti sorcerer dedicated to blast magic.
okay. I make joke, you see.
Flame it.
Yeah. Flame on!
Whoosh. Little known fact, except that maybe Rail would know. For when I roll initiative for that specific character, the macros dedicates to Athernol, flame on.
Fair enough. Okay, I guess I'll just keep talking then.
I think I don't have any more stories. Not really. Not any that are like story format.
So I'm going to tell this last one pretty quickly because we've already been at this for an hour and 45 minutes. And so for many years, I had a DM character. Not really like one that would... This was not a character that would be part of the party for more than a session or so. This was not a character who would like have the entire plot hinge on him. This was just a character that occasionally cropped up anytime I needed someone who was kind of evil but not actually the villain to run in and cause or fix a problem real quick. This character's name was Vython LaRose.
Oh shit.
Multi-classed rogue wizard. The specific build was the Bad Touch. For those not familiar, the Bad Touch is where you build a wizard to do maximum damage on touch spells, usually by taking rogue levels and improved feint.
It's hyper effective.
It is super effective. But then I got to a point, right? So, this character appeared in several different campaigns. And it was never the focus of any of them, so it's not like a bad DM kind of thing, but it is still a bad character, and we're going to explain why. This character appeared a few times over the course of a couple campaigns, basically as my DM problem solver. / problem creator. He was just there to fix the narrative at certain points and to be this kind of mystery that no one really thought to solve. And one time he did take the reins as a proper villain for a story arc, and that was fun. That resulted in like half of his backstory, actually, that one thing that happened. But the thing is, he was my fixer for multiple campaigns that took place in multiple universes. And also a character that I played on TK. So one day, I decided that this character appeared in 3 different D&D campaigns at various points, and several different TK rooms, some of which are not at all connected by any kind of physical space, because this character actually does exist everywhere. I gave him he was basically just a wizard, but I gave him a version of like the Nameless One's immortality, where if he were killed, he would forget everything that happened to him and just wake up fully formed somewhere else in a different universe. And this worked out. This was fine. He would appear in a setting, do stuff within that setting, disappear from that setting. It was actually a fine, in my opinion, fine way to go about making the same character fit multiple settings. The problem was that I had created an immortal character, and when you do that, you get too attached, and that was the problem, because remember how I said the point of the character was to be a little evil? Just a little evil?
Mm-hmm.
Evil enough to cause a problem, evil enough to solve a problem. The problem was that when I got to really playing him, I just was completely unable to commit. I would do things that were completely out of character to the supposedly evil wizard, and then super compensate for it by doing stuff that was way too evil for this wizard.
So kind of chaotic neutral rather than evil or good.
Not really chaotic neutral. Like, no, he was still pretty strongly evil. It's just he ended up being either too evil or not evil enough most of the time. And he was intended to be a villain, so being too evil is okay, I guess, but the problem is he was supposed to be a greater scope villain. He was supposed to be he was never supposed to be the villain. He was just supposed to be a villain, right? And I lost sight of that. I definitely lost sight of that. And the reason is because I got too close to the character, because I had him for too long. And I think that's really the problem with most of the characters that we all agree are bad. Like, you need a certain amount of investment to make a character decent. But it's amazingly easy to have a little too much investment and go completely the other way.
Yep.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that enthusiasm in a character can also be a problem.
Like new character enthusiasm, you mean?
Yeah. Like not letting the character come out naturally and instead trying to force the aesthetic without the reason on the character.
Yeah, true, and that's kind of a thing that happens when you have when you don't have a backstory. That happens a lot, and that's also been like a common theme among these characters. Like, they have a backstory in the sense of there is stuff that happened to them in the roleplay sense, but they didn't really have backstories.
They don't have history.
I cannot tell you who any of these people's parents were. Well, except Vesper, because his dad was him.
Fair enough. I mean, I didn't really dive into Steve's backstory because it's so fucking cliched.
Right. And that's another problem, too. Like, these cliches exist for a reason, but They're not, boy, it ain't good. During this talk, I forgot parents existed. Yes, thank you, Pat. So did we.
Show of hands, as it were. How many of these characters that we listed tonight were orphans?
Archeon was. I think. Maybe? Probably.
Okay, I'm not counting the kid with the sword as an orphan because the kid was an orphan, but the sword wasn't.
And the character was a sword in that case.
Right.
In Steve's case, he was definitely an orphan, just found wandering the woods and taken in by an assassin clan with just a simple thing with Steven on his name, with amnesia. So not only was he an orphan, he was an orphan with amnesia. Oh,
oh my god. Enyo had parents. Still does, probably. But he definitely... Yeah, you're right, actually. The sword was, in fact, an orphan because the creator was a dead guy. Anyway.
And at least in the genius sense.
Yeah, an orphaned wonder, let's say. But...
Yep.
So... The two characters I'm thinking of, Vython and Enyo, both had parents, but they never mattered. Like, there are parents somewhere for these people.
Blade Arm did not remember his parents, so there were parents somewhere, but fuck it, who knows. And as for Thuth, he was just kind of formed, as it were.
Just appeared out of the ether.
He looks exactly human. The fact that he's a blood mage and all the shit that he does just implies that he came from somewhere else and was just kind of created. He was a bioweapon as opposed to, was orphaned.
Some kind of homunculus.
Mm-hmm.
God, the special snowflake syndrome, I think, is part of the problem with these characters too. Like, when you're trying to make a character that just seems cool to your teenage edgy self, you end up with these horribly cliched characters, and then you overcompensate. You go the other way. You're like, well, that's fucking cliche. Let's not do that. And then you get like the exact opposite of cliche, which is just as bad.
Cliches exist for a reason.
Tropes
but
are not bad.
Used sparingly and with a twist.
What the twist?
I mean, I view TV tropes as a writing enhancement because it gives you a reason. It's like, okay, so this is what this means. So this is the entire amalgamation of the internet. God bless the internet for all its horrible, horrible things that it does. You still have things where the internet comes together to make something incredible, which is, in my opinion, TV tropes, because it just takes all of this shit together, compiles all of it, and just like, so by and large, humanity has determined that this is how this certain thing should act.
Meanwhile, Brandon pretends he's not just surfing Bowsette memes.
Why wouldn't you surf Bowsette memes?
It's a joke because he's talking about like the great resource for writing that is the internet and TV tropes. Meanwhile, the internet is also just mostly Bowsette right now.
I did preference that fact, but despite all of the horrible, horrible things the internet does.
Bowsette isn't horrible.
Okay, that is an argument for another day. We'll argue about that long after that blows over.
Fair enough.
Buh.
I think by and large, though, as Phoebe said earlier, the special snowflake being an issue, if that's just a problem with any character you create, though.
Yeah.
Because if you don't dedicate the time to create a character that is at least appealing to you, you won't want to play that character. You can make this character and then they just kind of drift into the background, and they might be an interesting character, but just like, well, I made this character and it didn't pan out the way I thought it would. Like there was that one character I made for the challenge where it was this is going back. This isn't necessarily a bad character. It's just a character that didn't go anywhere. It was like it's kind of a thiefish character. I have to look back through all the stuff, but the way the character was made, just like I liked the character, but he wasn't interesting enough for me to keep playing. And I think that's the balance you have to find between being the ultra special snowflake that you don't want anything to happen to, and just a character like, well, I like this character, but there are more interesting characters that I want to play.
Right, and yeah, it's really about striking a balance. Like, you know, what makes your character bad is if you don't have a backstory, and what makes your character bad is if you have way too much backstory.
What makes a character good is if you have, you know, an interesting in-depth backstory. What makes a character bad is if you have spend time to write that in-depth backstory and then do nothing with it.
Right, yeah, kind of. It's like, and there's some other stuff about that too. Like, I was watching the video about character creation and about how in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, if you're starting at first level and your character is 25, let's say, your character must have had an extremely uneventful life to have somehow not gained a level in that time.
Right.
Like being a farmer, for example.
Even a farmer would have to occasionally kill wolves, and killing 7 wolves would have leveled him up.
He is correct in that regard. Which is why I think you have, even in D&D, you have that whole recurring, and you know, as is recurring trope in most fantasy and anime stuff, that you have the young hero and everything, the hero's journey, as it were. Not the actual archetypical hero's journey, because not every character can make it through that entire cycle. But you end up with like, that's a 16-year-old kid. They grew up in a village and they killed some wolves, and they're a first level character, so they haven't done much. And now suddenly, village has been burned to the ground by the evil overlord, and now you must fight for vengeance.
But the end result of that is that every character is 16.
Right.
And that's not any good either.
It's not. Yeah, really, it's really not. But you can't, like you said, you can't have a character where like they're starting out in a D&D campaign or anything really. They're just starting out and they're exploring the world, and they're like 25. You know, it's just like they've done nothing. So in terms of starting out a character, you have to take into consideration what that character has done before they're featured in everything else.
Right, exactly. And that's, I think, why World of Darkness is a good thing for this, is that you just give your character the skills that you think they would have from doing the stuff they did, and that's what you start with.
Essentially, in World of Darkness, what you do is you create a character, you create a person, you create a living, breathing person, and then you apply one of these templates, these horrible, horrible templates to them. Which is
not necessarily. You can't just play naked World of Darkness with no splat.
You could, and that's been discussed by a couple of different people. But what I'm getting at is, some people, specifically Rail, some other people might be familiar with the concept of what I'm talking about. D&D are Pathfinder templates. And it's not like you're going to make a character like this. These are things that apply to your character in such a way that they change them up a little bit from what they would normally be. So, like, in one case, it was going to be an undead campaign in D&D. I made a rogue character that never got played, but the concept was an evolved Grave Touch ghoul. And what that basically meant was my character started out as a human level 1 rogue. Things happened, and then you apply these templates to it. And what I'm getting back to the World of Darkness, every character in World of Darkness does not start out as what they are in World of Darkness. There's always some catalyst in terms of genius or something else that occurs to change them into what they are. For genius, like it is, it's the catalyst. I mean, fuck it. My character in Genius was just got so fucking angry at a snow globe. His entire mission in life is to destroy the snow globe.
And this is considered a good character, so you really have to think about, like, you have to think about what makes a character bad.
You really do. And like for Vampire, in the Vampire game we're doing, like the character I'm making in Vampire, he was a kid in New York who wanted to be a punk rock star, and then he got, he was embraced and became a kindred. or beast or werewolf or whatever have it. There's something that unlocks this potential in them. And that's why, in terms of that, like World of Darkness, and then taking character templates from D&D, or if there's any for Pathfinder that I have not discovered yet, you're taking these templates and you're applying them to a character you've already created, which I think is a way that you can get around the entire prospect of just making a bad character. Because if you start out making a character and they're already like, well, my character started out as being able to throw fireballs at the age of 1, there's no development there. There's no way for this character to develop other than becoming like this Ubermensch character when they start the game.
I mean, yes, that is true. Although, there is something to be said for the character who could throw fireballs when they were 1. Like, what does that do to you as a person?
There's 2 different ways you can go with that, is what my opinion on that is. You can either go with the whole stereotypical, like, oh, they're a magical prodigy, they're going to be able to do so much. And it's not like they're going to be able to, start a campaign at the age of 1 or 5 or what have you. You might be able to get away with, being level 8 or what have you. Yes, indeed. The plot of your Genius game is redacted.
And it's true. Totally redacted. Anyway. But yeah,
what was I saying? So, like, you can't really do that. You have to take you have to do more with your character creation than just thinking about the rule of cool. Which, granted, rule of cool has its benefits. If your character can do something just because it's cool, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Granted, in most systems, you'll have to roll to do that cool thing. Case in point, talking about bringing up one of my better characters, Pax. There's this entire sequence where he was going to run up to the forecastle of the ship, or run up to the wheel of a ship, kill the guy steering the ship, and then hack the steering column away, and then jump off the side of the boat in a perfect swan dive. In freeform RP, it goes off without a hitch, whatever. In any kind of system where you have to roll dice, hell, my character, he fucking flubbed the fucking roll. He got to the edge of the ship, jumped off, tripped, and then smacked his head against the side of the boat as he fell down.
Yeah.
When you're making a character, you have to have these human moments. Your character just can't be absolutely perfect in everything. I think that's
your character can be pretty damn close.
No, your character can be pretty damn close in a certain thing. Like your what I'm trying to get at. Let's take for a fact. Let's just use an archetype. Let's use Wolverine, for example. Right? Wolverine's hell of a character, great fighter, virtually unkillable, so on and so forth. But his human interactions, due to the course of his life, suffer from that.
Right, yeah.
You have to take that into consideration when making a character.
Also, I'm just going to throw it out there, though. Role-playing as Wolverine sounds just deeply unfun.
It is.
It would be fun.
Go on.
Playing as a wizard that starts the campaign at 35 at level 1, but he's been spending all his XP enchanting weapons in a blacksmith shop.
No. You might as well just play absurd. Okay, to explain this meme I'm using, I found a YouTube video, and I'm going to link it, but I found a YouTube video where a guy talks about a one-shot campaign he played in, where he created a character who was level 1 in every class.
I actually have a story after you finish this that kind of coincides with my point a little bit, but yeah, go on.
Literally level 1 in every class.
Wait, what?
That's a lot of saving throws.
It was a one-shot game, so they were starting at a higher level, and he made a character that was multi-classed into everything.
Character packet, not my character sheet.
What system?
Packet.
Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Oh, 5th, never mind.
Here,
It'd be
this
truly...
is that video if anyone wants to go watch it later, but it's actually hilarious. But
It would be truly impressive if it was 3-5 in every fucking class.
Oh my god. But no, so I want to talk about this because that's an example of a character that's bad on purpose, but in being bad on purpose, it's actually super cool and interesting. So the character's name is Absurd because he is in fact absurd. And by multi-classing into everything, he created a character that was good at absolutely nothing. A fighter who can't fight, a healer who can't heal, a caster who can't cast.
A rogue who can't sneak attack.
Exactly. It's like the worst character ever in terms of like actual rules. But and he plays it in this like really over the top bombastic kind of way, like this character's totally full of himself. And that creates a character that is good and memorable, really.
Yeah, I can see that.
It reminds me of, well, no, not really. It's a different person. I was going to talk about Brandon. What's the name of the character of the land of the that one kid from Log Horizon? The sorcerer, the blonde kid.
I do not remember.
Like Rolf or some shit, Rudolph. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of like that. I'm not familiar with the story you're talking about. I'll have to watch it later on when I'm not drunk and I can actually appreciate it. But the character is, he's done everything that he thinks he's. Never mind. Fuck it. Delete. Whatever. That's actually a decent character arc. Never mind.
What? What are we talking about?
I got off the rails because I'm drunk.
Did you fail your save?
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, there's... Everybody makes bad characters when they're young. We can all agree on that.
Seems fair.
I think that the trick is twofold, right? The trick is to keep making characters till you get good ones, and the other trick is to not get attached to the characters you made when you were 15, because, oh my god, they are universally terrible.
No, you can take ideas from the character you made at 15, just like, I can make this better, but I'm going to have to clear everything away and start from scratch.
You got to do a Hollywood reboot.
Essentially, yeah.
Like, I defy this group, like anybody, any of our viewers, anybody. In fact, hit me on Twitter at Padre Luminadre. If you created a good character when you were 15, I want to hear about it. Tell me all about it, and I will eat crow next episode if anybody tells me about it.
When is our next episode?
The week after next. Oh, you said what is our next episode? I don't actually know.
We'll discuss that towards the end of the show. What I'm referring to is it would be more interesting is when you eat crow is if it's during the period of time where I'm there to witness you eat crow.
Ah, true. But at any rate, you'd have to, take ideas from your 15-year-old self, because your 15-year-old self has a better idea than you do about what's cool. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Just take all the edginess out, because. Not all the edginess, I guess. You got to be a little edgy, but...
I mean, if I was going to remake Blade Arm or Thoth or any of my characters from that period of time now, they'd be infinitely better characters.
We are absolutely doing this kid with a sword versus Archaon, by the way.
With Blade
okay,
Arm...
Okay, yeah, let's do it then.
Just tell me when and where.
Soon, private messages.
Sounds good.
I would almost say we should do that as just like a bonus fucking stream on Roll20 or some shit, because that'd be fucking hysterical.
It'd be text RP, so it'll take forever.
You could post it on Reddit.
You know what we could do?
Please no.
We could do it in text RP and then read it as a stream.
Okay, so if we're gonna do that, then I'm gonna have to like really channel my 17-year-old self, or however old I was when I made that character. Like,
and a lot of bourbon.
Like, it's gonna have to be bad, like real bad. But I don't know that I'm physically capable of that at this point. But I think it's also important that we all got to talk about these little mistakes that we made.
Yeah.
Did we really do a roundup on each individual character though?
No, we didn't, and we can. So let's put them in like categories. Like, so the powerhouse category that's got Enyo in it, and Archeon is in it, I think.
He never really did anything magical.
No, yeah, you're right. That wasn't really a powerhouse character. Blade Arm kind of ended up in that category, though.
He is technically a god.
That is true. Some of these characters are just bad because they are designed to be beat sticks. They're not designed to have a personality, so they don't have a decent personality. Which, again,
I would argue in Blade Arm's case, like, I designed him. There's a potential for him to have an interesting personality, and then everything just went off the rails.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, making a beat stick is actually fine if that's the kind of game you're playing. Like, you know, if you sit down at a table, right, with a guy with a GM, say, who doesn't really care about what he's doing, he's just here to have a good time, he's made or maybe he's got a module with him, you know, and you're just going to sit down and play some D&D real quick and it's not a big thing, yeah, make a beat stick. That's fine. Right?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine because at that point, you know, your various little skill rolls aside from athletics and the various lock picking and climbing and all that stuff, your social skills mean absolutely nothing.
That's not necessarily true. Your social skills on the character can mean stuff, but what I mean by beat stick isn't just a character that's good at hitting stuff. What I mean is a beat stick would be a character who is just their stats. If I'm sitting down for a one shot and we're just here to have a good time, have some beers, play some D&D, I'm not going to make a backstory. Why would you bother? You know, you're just here to have a good time, you know?
The only backstory you would need would be to justify any weird shit you might do in character creation that you need to get past the GM.
Yeah, but in this particular situation where you're just doing a one shot, the GM's probably going to allow most anything. What I'm saying is, like, there's context to these things. You can bring a beat stick if that's what your game is. I was an arena rat, so I had a beat stick.
Beat sticks were kind of necessary.
Really progressed to that phase.
Right. And then there were the characters like, there were the characters that lasted too long, that too many things compounded and they just became unplayable, like Steven.
Exactly, yeah.
And Vytham. And I don't know if Arkin was in this group or not.
If who was?
Arkin.
I mean, I did play him for several years, and he got progressively worse in terms of aesthetics, so I assume so.
Yeah. But that's all one basic problem, and that is just that you gotta let characters go, because if you just play the same character, over and over again, it's gonna end up bad, even if it was good to start with.
Absolutely, I agree with this.
Like, I for one don't think Vytham was a bad character to start with, even with the ridiculous, like, Curse of the Nameless One Immortality thing, because he did his job. He did exactly what he was meant to do. He was kind of evil, and he made shit happen. That's what he was for.
And it's not, and for anybody who might be attached to any of their characters, that's not saying that you have to throw out every single character you've ever made after you're done with them. There's no reason why you can't bring them back, but you just have to be mindful of what you're bringing them back to do.
Right, yeah. Characters have purposes, and sometimes the purpose is just to be a protagonist, and that's fine, and sometimes the purpose is to cause chaos, and that's also fine, and sometimes the purpose is to be a beat stick, but you can't just let a character fester.
Festering in the limelight. That should be a phrase.
Unless it's Uncle Fester.
I mean, he deserves
Uncle-
it, limelight.
Uncle Fester is best character.
Yeah, he's Christopher Lloyd.
I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for Raul Julia.
Yeah, but Gomez, but Uncle Fester.
At any rate.
Wake the dead.
At any rate, so we've got beat sticks. They have their place. We've got these characters that we had for years and years and years and years and years and need to be, rethought every once in a while. But they also have their place. You can do stuff with them, like when the third time Vython appeared in a D&D game, my players were confused because it was the same character. I didn't even tell them his name, like they never knew his name, but I described this character and they were just like perplexed. They were like, who the fuck is this guy that keeps appearing in different campaigns?
I mean, he's not Boxcar Joe, the magical hobo.
He is not Boxcar Joe, the magical hobo. But it was its own little mystery that didn't really have any. It didn't have any like bearing on anything because he just showed up, did a thing, and disappeared for a while. But it did its job. It created a mystery that would not be solved, but that raised some interest.
Yeah. Case in point with Steve, I don't play Steve seriously anymore. Essentially, the only point I bring him out anymore is just to cruise around any RP site I find, just to see what's going on, and it's just to see how many people who might remember the name basically from the keep.
Right. I'm suddenly feeling this urge to jump back on TK and see if anything's going on.
We should absolutely do that thing.
Roving like a group. 3 deep. Just raid.
Absolutely, but anyway, back to you have to consider any character that you bring in has to have a purpose. Having an aimless purpose, aside from the beat stick. Beat stick's mainly for one shots. You can get some use out of a beat stick from anything else, but there's not much you can really do character progression wise, and eventually that character will become stale if you're having to try to have them interact with other people that doesn't involve combat.
Yes, true. I mean, that said, there's other reasons to have a beat stick. But if you just play the beat stick as a pile of stats, it will eventually get old unless you've got like a GM to throw new and interesting challenges at your beat stick, and then you can just play the dice game, which is fun. It's a fun game.
That's why gambling addiction is a problem.
I like dice.
As do I, except for the fact that dice do not like me. Which I guess is the reason why I keep challenging you to games of 40K.
And you keep losing.
I'm just bad at games.
To be fair, you're pretty brutal with the tactics there, Brandon.
Yeah, fair enough. So, yeah, I think that's really been our conclusion, that these characters aren't bad in a vacuum, they're bad in context. Even if that context is just the cliches we use to make them. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Things are only
Well,
bad in context.
I don't know. I know of a couple that are bad in any context, but
I'm sure I could think of a context for them, but we're not going to do that right now.
I guess we should possibly discuss what we should do next time.
Yeah. Let's do that. So, what do we think, guys? What should we do for next episode? We could do DM styles. We could do
If you do DM styles, I would not mind coming back.
Maybe. We've lost Steven. Steven disappeared. Oh, there he is. We could do DM styles. We could do something like we could do power set theory crafting.
Power set theory crafting would be interesting. I don't really think I bring much to the table in that regard, but it'd be interesting to discuss.
We could do we could discuss because we spent a lot of time today talking about beat stick superpowers. We could talk about that.
I think at some point we need to do a episode where we discuss our best characters we've ever made.
But then we'll stop being piles of self-loathing because we'll be proud of stuff.
No, we'll still be piles of self-loathing because either the internet or the other people we talk with will point out the flaws.
You're right. Yes. Next time we'll talk about the best characters we've made, and we'll talk about why they worked, and we'll talk about the things that we still could improve.
I'm cool with this.
That seems great. And just like today, we'll have the show open so people who want to can come talk. But if you don't, then that's fine. Me and Steve can talk. It's not a big deal. And we'll talk about what works when you start making characters. And this is going to be interesting for me because I'm mostly a DM. So talking about what makes good characters is going to be interesting for me.
I think in my case, as I pointed out, there were the two characters I listed as being my worst characters ever were made essentially like the first character and like the second or third character. I mean, there are other ones in there, but they really don't count because they were just kind of spring-offs of those. And then after that point, it just depends on what characters were particularly interesting and worth playing. Some of them I've already mentioned tonight.
Yeah. So next time it'll be the best characters ever.
Thank you for having me on the show.
You are very welcome.
We were more than happy to have you.
As always, if you want to be part of the program, message me on Discord. If you super want to be part of the program and you're not in the Discord, message me at or find me on Twitter at Padre Luminadre.
Same thing here. If you don't want to particularly talk to Brandon about anything, you can message me on Discord if you're part of the Discord group, or Twitch, or on Twitter at DDKMadCat.
Indeed. I think that's all we've got. Is that all we've got?
I have no more.
I'm a bit too drunk to think of anything else, so yeah, I'm good.
And his save has been failed again. So this has been Save versus Bourbon, and thank you everybody. Thank you very much for watching, and I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.